Hey everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attachment Theory in Action. I am so excited to welcome Roxeanna Steiner to the podcast today. Roxeanna is an early childhood specialist, and her passion is built on the foundational understanding that everything happens in the context of relationships. As an early childhood specialist, Roxeanna facilitates adult learning sessions with an inside out approach that looks holistically at life's puzzle pieces. Through authentic, reflective conversations, Roxeanna journeys with others to vulnerably and courageously better understand the self and others through the lens of early childhood development and emotional well-being. With a career in education that has spanned over 35 years, she has had the privilege of sharing her expertise at numerous conferences nationwide. Whether partnering with a wide variety of early learning programs or serving as a parent educator, Roxeanna has found joy in reflectively engaging with parents, educators, and leaders, bringing the hope of relationships to young children and their caregivers. Roxeanna also shares her experience as a mother of a child with developmental disabilities, a Be Strong Families Parent Cafe instructor, a parenting group facilitator, and a project manager for Vroom, where she shares her warmth and knowledge to empower others by emphasizing the power of authentic connection between children and their caregivers. Well, hi, Roxeanna. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Attachment Theory in Action. I know that we are going to have just a wonderful conversation and a deep dive into this, what I think is a very important topic that we don't really talk about very much. We talk about attachment, obviously, but we're also going to be thinking about it from the lens of attachment with a child that maybe has developmental delays or disabilities. And I know you've had a journey on this in your life. And I wondered if you might just begin by sharing a little bit about your story.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Kirsty. This is a privilege to do this with you and lots of fun. So I'm looking forward to it. Yes, my husband and I had a daughter who is now 33 years old. And 5 years after she was born, we had a son, Austin, who was born with some delays that just continued to occur, one delay after another, a lot of medical needs. He was in and out of the hospital a lot with breathing problems and illnesses. And we discovered at 9 months that his brain cells were deteriorating instead of growth. And as we know in early childhood, those first 5 years of life is when that brain grows the most, right? And that was just, beyond devastating for us. But I think with the knowledge that I had being in early childhood already, and understanding the significance of that, was hard. But I will say I knew what to do, right? We start therapy. And so I went into the checklist mode of this is what we've got to do. We got to get early intervention. And I'll say that, beyond there was a lot of medical problems. So eventually we got a lot of medical equipment as well as just all of the therapies that were coming into our home. And I was working at the time full time, and that became too much of a struggle. I will say that his needs became too great for me to count on other people to do that caregiving. And so I eventually had to make the hard decision between my husband and I to quit. And a family that depended on two incomes, that was hard. And still support my daughter and trying to have a normal, whatever normal life stands for, right? But by the age of 2, he ended up getting a trach and being put on a ventilator, and multiple of other things that would support him in his medical needs. And we were blessed. I'll say that we had him in our lives for 11 years. And the doctors, that was way beyond the doctor's scope of seeing that he was going to live that long. But he taught us a lot. And I appreciate you allowing me to tell the story, because that is a privilege to help him to live on. And I think that if I can use my experiences and his, my daughter's and my husband's, as a way to help someone else in their journey, then his purpose on this earth was absolutely confirmed. So I often I enjoy talking about him. So yeah, we had him for 11 years. So, and it's
something that before we move on and get further into a more in-depth conversation, firstly, thank you for sharing Austin's story, or at least some of his story.
Yeah.
I know that there's so much more to that story. I want to check before we move on. And we talked about this briefly as we were thinking about this podcast, but the use of labels or words to describe a person that may have a developmental delay or a physical disability. Tell me a little bit about your experience of terminology and words, and what is there a correct verbiage that we should be using or that should be considered from your perspective?
Yeah, you know what, the fact that you're just asking is exactly what we should be doing. We should be asking, the person with any type of diagnosis or not, what do they want to be a part of, them. And I believe with my whole heart that always a child is a child first. An adult is an adult first. A person is a person first before their diagnosis. My why of why I do what I do is that beyond the diagnosis, beyond the behaviors, beyond the delays or whatever, that child is a child that wants to thrive and desires to thrive and deserves to thrive in whatever capacity they can, which is unique to their own. So, we can search the internet and everyone has an opinion, but I think just remembering that and you've done it very well. You said a child with a delay, a child with some type of an autism, for instance, a child with a disability. I wear glasses. I have a visual impairment, but I'm still a person first. And that I will say, Austin went to school with a nurse, and the beginning of every school year, I would either speak to his class, or sometimes I spoke to the whole entire school around what to expect, because Austin was in a wheelchair with a ventilator on the bottom with all these tubes. And of course, the ventilator would often, beep and make lots of noises. And children are curious. They're naturally curious. And I would never want to create any biases in children to have judgments or to create their own, biases against those that are different or have differences than themselves. And so I had a dear friend of mine. We were at McDonald's one time, and she said, "That woman keeps staring at us." And I said, "Yes, she does." And she said, "Doesn't that bother you?" And I said, "No, it doesn't, because I see this as my opportunity to educate. I'm going to treat Austin because what he deserves is because he's my son. First of all, I'm going to treat him with love and respect, and I'm going to talk to him, even though he doesn't talk back. I'm still going to talk to him. We're out and about. So we took Austin everywhere with us as much as possible and to my daughter's sporting events and stuff. But when a child would ask questions, before a parent had the opportunity to say, shh, don't say anything, don't look, that builds those biases, right? And I would say, no, that's okay. Come on over. How old are you? And they'd give their age. And I'm like, Austin is 10 years old. And do you see all those tubes? That helps him to breathe. You breathe through your mouth, he breathes through that tube. And so I would just kind of have that simple conversation about those differences, but refer to him as a child. And he goes to school just like you do. And he enjoys to be tickled just like you do. Do you enjoy to be tickled? And some type of commonality there.
Right. Well, and helping them understand it's so interesting because this conversation aligns with attachment in so many ways in terms of a secure attachment is fostered through this reciprocity, this give and take, and this emotional safety. You were creating an emotionally safe space for a child to be able to come to you and say, what's going on here? Why does this person look different? Or why does this person have different things that I don't have? And you, in your responses, in your welcoming of that, allowed those children to make connections with Austin that they would not have had otherwise. Fear is created out of that lack of understanding.
It is.
And that lack of emotional safety to be able to say, when I think about as an adult, as to be able to openly converse and say, oh, it's a bit scary to see a person with so many medical devices. I don't know what's going to happen. To be able to have that conversation with you as a mother and you to say, yeah, I can get how that would be a bit scary, but here, let me explain it all to you. And now it's not scary anymore. And now I can relate to your son because I don't have to worry about those other things. So you're really creating that sense of security that is the same as when we build attachment.
Yeah, it is. It's all about relationships, and whether it's this immediate relationships or it's future relationships, right? And I will say it became Austin became a reinforcer for other children in other grades to when they finished their work. They got to earn coming down and reading him a story or a book, and that was very evident. When he passed away. That people still would share their impact and children would share their impact or the mothers would. And it just touched my heart to see how even in the classrooms, how the children, by the modeling of the therapist and the teacher, the children began to treat Austin as a regular child, their peer, but would assist him. So there was empathy that was grown because of the great modeling and the great care that he was in and in the school system. I had one director when we had his IEP said, just as long as he breathes and he keeps breathing on my watch. Yeah, no problem, right? So to even have some humor in it, it doesn't always have to be so serious. But I in my heart of hearts, I believe that Austin had a great sense of humor, and even though he never spoke a word, he communicated with his eyes and his body language and his responses. But we never stopped talking to him, right? And what we know in early childhood is that receptive language is the first that develops. And that's why, it's so important. And we know about attachment, that it's so important to talk to children, have face-to-face. And you talked about the serve and return and how important that is. And it's the same way with any child that has delays. As adults, professionals, parents, caregivers, we should still initiate and continue that serve and return or those responses, regardless if we receive it back, which is hard. That
Well, I was going to
challenging.
say, our conversations, we get vulnerable and personal, and I mean, I can only imagine how hard it must have been. You not only as a mom, you're dealing with just processing this change, because it was a change. You were not expecting a child necessarily with delays, and so you're processing all of that information, and you're trying, based on everything that you know as a mom and as a professional, to engage with your child. And I can only imagine how emotionally hard it must have been to to accept that you weren't going to get that return.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll say, even with other children, to interpret what he might be thinking, or to put words in there for him, so that there seems to be some type of serve and return, right? Um, and I think that I watched that in my daughter, now a mother herself of a newborn. She sends me videos, and what I witnessed is something so beautiful, because I see me, and I see her talking to her 2-month-old baby as if he just understood every single thing that she says to him, and then even create stories. Oh, tell me more. It looks like you're really excited about that. Did you hear that dog? Oh, I heard it too, And I just have such a warmth in my heart to see that develop in her. And then I know it's with a lot of mothers. All right, that's a natural thing. But I think I'm more attuned to it because I had to be even more intentional with Austin throughout his 11 years. And she learned that. She learned that, as well as my husband and all of his gym friends, that guys that would come over, and they just talk to him like he was any other kid. And it just became almost a contagion effect of relationship and connectedness. Yeah.
What do you think might make it hard? So I'm not only thinking about a child that maybe has special needs, but a child we talked right at the beginning about a child being a child first, and not being the behavior or the diagnosis or the history of the child. It's easier said than done. What do you think gets in the way for some adults? Because, whether they're parent, professional, caregiver, what makes it hard for some adults to put those pieces to one side and see the child first?
I have a couple of theories. It could be, how they were, I'm putting this in quotes, but shushed as a child, right? Or lack of exposure. And, I reflect back into my own childhood experiences and the contained classroom, the classroom with the different kids that were in one part of the building, and they didn't go out on the playgrounds with us. And we only saw them occasionally. And so I made up stories in my head, my imagination, and I know my friends did. And so when we would see them, there were some biases that we built, implicit biases even, that remain in the head, right, in your mind. And or when a parent would say, "Oh, don't stare at that person," stop staring. When it's just my curiosity of wondering, right? And so then there's that shame. When you see someone different, do you look away, or do you engage them and just look in their eyes and smile? I think there's missed opportunities to to just look someone in their eyes and smile. Simple smile. So I think, their own biases, or implicit biases that were laid by another generation or whatever, and their own experiences, their fears of different, and even their own attachment. So their own adaptive attachment of, what did who did they connect with? Who was that one person, that one buffer for them when they were upset or angry or throwing temper tantrums or having behaviors? Who was there, or who was it that was there for them? And if they don't have that experience of empathy and inclusion, of, you are okay, I'm here with you. Yes, it's okay to be mad right now or upset, or that. Yeah.
Well, I think about perhaps an adult who had a negative attachment experience as a child, and who maybe has an avoidant attachment style. And so then when they engage with somebody else who does not provide that return, that those kind eyes that you were talking about, that engagement, that may potentially be reinforcing that adaptive attachment style that they have.
Yes.
And so, I've worked in all kinds of schools before moving over to the US, and I spent a lot of time working in special education schools with many children like Austin. And I think if I was not a securely attached person and I was engaging with many people who were challenging that I might find it difficult. That, I'd be, well, why aren't they engaging with me, or they're staring at me, or we're not making eye contact. And so all of these things that get stirred up in me, that if I don't address it and don't recognize it and reflect on it, then I'm not going to be able to work to form an attachment with that child.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. I think that there's every moment in our day and I use this not lightly, is a brain building, relationship building moment. It's an opportunity, and it's what you do with it. No matter if you're washing dishes, if you're doing laundry, if you're teaching a subject, or if you are in the car, a car ride, or washing hands. It's every moment could be just a short conversation of words either exchanged or not, but you're still engaging. You're still saying that I see you, I value you as a person, and you are loved and you are lovable. And that's all that we all desire.
Well, one of the questions we were talking about was, how do you create these opportunities for attachment and connection when there isn't a lot of serve and return happening? And I think you've really talked about that, in terms of, one is, we continue to talk and we converse and we continue to engage, because we know that first and foremost, children understand words and tones and gestures before they can even speak to us to communicate back.
Yes.
And not only that, but you kind of hinted to this idea that it's about the feeling that's created too. There's a feeling created when there's no interaction, and there's a feeling created when there is interaction, albeit one-sided, perhaps. We are still creating this sense of feeling that I'm loved and somebody's here to take care of me and I'm safe. It's just, if you were somebody who had a let's say, stable upbringing, oftentimes when you go home, nothing needs to be said. It's a feeling that you have. Like you can take a deep breath and breathe out, and it's a feeling. And so I think those two pieces of that constant communication, interaction, and remembering that you're creating a feeling are things that are so important for parents and caregivers to remember, that even if your child is typically developing, there are still going to be moments where there's no return.
Yes.
If you have a teenager, you'll be familiar with that, right?
Get checked out. They're not listening to you anymore.
Right. And so remembering that we should still be doing these things.
Right. And you know what, you brought up a good point that led me to think, using the sense of touch. So children sometimes get so focused or tunnel vision or so zoned in to what they're doing that it is hard auditorily to hear somebody calling their name or
right.
talking to them. And so just that gentle touch on the shoulder, right? Or I watched a parent one time with a child who had autism, and he was so zoned into his game. And mom came up and she just said, "Okay, we're going to shut this down in 1 minute." And she came back maybe seconds later, right? And she said, "Okay, I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all done." And they had done this obviously so many times that he was fine with it. He shut it down, and she said, "Eye contact now, look at me." And right away he looked at her, but she had to touch him first. I missed that part. She did touch him and then gave him those verbal cues as well. And so I think there's, again, we've got to find what is that unique contact, that connection. What does that child need to really be able to connect without, a blanket judgment of everybody's in a box. Every child's in a box, and this is the way I'm going to teach, to talk, to do it, because we all have different learning styles. We have different communication styles and learning.
We do, but I want to also highlight that there are some things that can and are successful across the board. I think whether you have a child with a disability or a typically developing child, the importance of touch, like you mentioned, the importance of consistency and predictability. You said this parent and child had this interaction numerous times. And not only for children, but for us too. We thrive when there is mostly predictability. Yes, there are some folks that like a little bit more spontaneity in their lives, but if we know what's coming, we are less afraid. We aren't in our back brain, and we're able to then continue to relate and explore. And so I just, there's that word of different, and all too often we fall into this trap of, because somebody looks different or has different needs to us, that everything should be different. Like, oh, don't look at them because of A, B, and C. But no, we should engage and we should interact and we should ask for their opinion. And
yeah. Or even asking that hard question sometimes. I see that, there's some delays here or disability. Do you mind? How would you like for me to address? How would you like for me to introduce you? That's a hard question, and I think it's harder for us than it would be for the receiver. I wanted to go back just a little bit. We were talking about touch and verbal predictability. Picture schedules. I can't emphasize enough how picture schedules with typical children, with atypical children or not, picture schedules are just so vital in a classroom, in a home environment, even, and reduces that stress, right? Helps that child have a little bit more sense of a felt sense of control over an ex, predictability of what's expected. And it reduces the stress of the power struggles, right? um,
They know what's coming, and we
yeah,
can all see it. We're all on the same page,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's no mystery surrounding it. There's safety, and knowing that I'm the adult and I'm here to help us walk through what's coming next.
yeah, yeah. And I think that, when we think about attachment, even more important for those children because their lives often are not predictable. They're inconsistent with the people um, that should be consistent in their lives, and sometimes just the simplicity of having a schedule of who's picking the child up from school. Right? If you could have just pictures of those caregivers or those possible pickup people,
Right.
what a sense of a peace that might instill in a child, whether they have verbal skills or not. But
Well, I'm really finding myself trying to think about Austin's experience and what he may have experienced or felt. And I think about the other children that I've worked with who were also nonverbal, or were maybe confined to a wheelchair and, didn't have the ability to get up and move themselves, or move away from something that felt uncomfortable to them. And so I'm thinking about how I would want to have that predictability. If in Austin's case, perhaps with all those medical devices and the doctors and nurses coming and going,
yes,
how vital it would be for him to have a secure attachment, or, that psychological home base in you, to help ease that fear of, oh my goodness, what's coming next.
yep. And what are they? Who's coming next, right? Or whatever. Yeah, I will say that was an agreement between my husband and I that, one of us would always stay with him in the hospital, regardless, night and day. Somebody was with him 24 hours to advocate for him, to speak for him, to be that buffer, to speak on his behalf. And it's interesting when you think about that respect. If a doctor came in the room and didn't address him first, that would hurt my heart. And I personally didn't want to see that doctor again. And so I think about, why wouldn't a person address another person and greet them? And I guess I just want that to be a thought, that just because they can't speak for someone can't speak for themselves, can't just pretend they're not in the room. Yeah, yeah. I think, I spoke about my daughter, and I'm making a little shift here, but she was 5 years older than him. And when we think about attachment, because he requires so much of our needs, our attention, emotionally, physically, all of the above. We had to really be even more intentional with our relationship with her, one-on-one time with her, and making sure that she felt safe and secure, even when things seemed to be chaotic and uncertain and scary, really scary. We've talked about the anxiety that comes with that, and I'll say that there is, even though a child doesn't show outward signs of anxiety, doesn't mean that it's internally not there, right?
Mhm.
So to be proactive, to talk about emotions, to talk about feelings, uncertainties, and talk about the facts, what's happening right now. We don't have to go into big details, but to just to keep them informed at their age appropriate level
Mhm.
of understanding. Um, and I feel I can honestly say we did the best that we could do to make sure that one of us was always there for her, to make sure that she still went to sporting events and practices, and and if we could all do that as a family, great. If not, then one of us was always there uh, to make it as you know we didn't go on vacation anymore. We bought a boat so we could go on the river for a little bit of escape. And I think as far as that relationships, just to escape for a little while and self-care, that was really important. And I know not everybody can buy a boat, but what does
Right.
self-care mean for you? What does date night look like?
Mhm.
And maybe a date night is just a walk around the block
Mhm.
to talk, to not talk, just to be with each other.
I think remembering that even as adults, you have attachment relationships and you have to, yes, the self-care is so vital, but also nurturing your attachment relationship with whoever that might be, um,
Mhm.
so that you can continue to support the attachment relationships that you have with the children in your lives as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And reflectively, I think in the beginning, um, I made a mistake, and I pushed my husband away, and he dealt with it his way too, and pushed me away because we
Mhm.
were in this state of grief, even. But once I realized that I have a partner here, and I can trust him, that I stopped and started letting go of some of the control, and allowed him to take Austin to a doctor's appointment. Whew, painful as that was to me, I had to let him, right?
Mhm.
I had to allow him to find his own way with the clunkiness of of that care and
Uh-huh.
trust.
Well,
And
you're highlighting, yeah, again, you're highlighting that attachment relationship, that part of building that secure attachment is allowing the other person to be independent of you, with the knowledge that the two of you can come back together and reconnect and still be emotionally safe together.
yeah,
That, you know, it was scary, but at the end of the day, we come back together and we repair anything that needs repairing. Um, and we regain that feeling of safety with each other.
yeah, yeah, and find gratitude in that as well, right? To be appreciated and grateful, and but that took some time, and I'll say with counseling and
Mhm.
good people that surrounded us to remind us of that, um, and we beat the statistics. We're still married, and it's we'll be celebrating 37 years
Wow.
this month. So we've survived, and so yeah.
Well, I think you highlight something that's important for listeners to remember, is that, and kind of has been a theme throughout this conversation, is that it's okay to be real. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask the hard questions. It's okay to make mistakes. It's what you do with those, with what comes next, that
Mhm.
is what's so important. it's okay if you're unsure how to approach a child who is different from you or who is behaving in a way that is a little bit scary or stir something up in you or some insecurities or uncertainties. It's okay to have those feelings. It's what's important is what comes next and how do we stay real and say, "Whoa, this is kind of hard, but I still want to connect with you."
Yeah. Yeah. And launching off those feelings as the mother, as teacher, whoever's close grandmother, aunt, of that child, to I'll say it's okay to have those feelings too, of anger, sadness, grief, um, just bitterness, maybe. Um, it's okay.
Mhm.
And I don't know that we talk enough about that, man. That's probably a whole nother podcast, but to it's uncomfortable for others that are supporting, I'll say myself, because of their own uncomfortableness with talking about those emotions, right?
Mhm.
What do I do now? I don't know what to do. She's really angry, and or she's just bawling her eyes out right here with me, and I don't know what to do. And sometimes it's not about what to do. It's just about being with,
Mhm.
and just having that response of, this really sucks right now for you, doesn't it? I can't even imagine, but I'm here for you. And that's all sometimes a person needs to hear.
Mhm. That's so important for, I think, particularly for professionals to hear that we as professionals might not always have an answer for a parent or a caregiver that is experiencing something like you did through your story and your journey with Austin. That as a professional, I might not always have the answers, or I might not have a good answer um, or a hopeful answer. And how best can I support you and just be with you through those feelings so that you can then be the secure attachment figure for Austin.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It does. We all need each other.
Mm-hmm.
We're not supposed to be isolated, no matter what. Um, and our stories, my story isn't isolated either. There's millions of stories like my own, and um, so you're not alone, even though it seems like you're alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
If you had, if there was one thing, I'll put you on the spot here,
Ah,
that you would really like, let's say, I think about, as you just mentioned, other parents or caregivers that have a child where there is a lack of return or serve and return. What's one thing that you would really like them to know or think about or remember based on your experience in your story?
um, to to hold every moment as a treasure, good, bad, and ugly. To know that, and to love with your whole heart, and to know that every moment is precious, and to take advantage of that connection between you and the child, no matter what. So I, even if it's just snuggling and watching TV together, there's proximity, there's touch. Um, there's a massage, a head massage. There's something that says, that says, I love you. You belong to me. You belong, and I'm going to treat you as if uh, you were the child that I envision is internally within you. I think about I know that even though he never spoke a word and he never walked, I believe in his spirit was vibrant and alive. And I believe he had a great sense of humor and loved to giggle and laugh. And he found life joyful. And to picture that, that got me through some hard times, to know what that inner child is really there.
And you saw that child first.
I did. I did. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Roxeanna, for sharing your story with us today and being vulnerable. I appreciate your vulnerability, and just not only your story, but Austin's story as well. We thank you so much.
Welcome. It was a privilege. Thank you.